Welcome to the family room of my house. It's currently December. I'm not riding, and this is where I keep my bike when I'm not using it. The nice thing about this bike is it will fit inside the parameters of the door. With just cocking the handlebars a little bit, I can get it in here, and I have tremendous indoor storage. Best of all, I get to look at it all winter long. It's a beautiful machine. I'm going to talk to you today about the difference between the various Triumph Bonnevilles over the years. Okay, so if you're in love with Bonnevilles as much as I was, the look of the bike, you're going to ask yourself, which one do you want? Do you want the original Meriden, or do you want a Hinckley Bonneville, which is the newer versions? This one is a Hinckley. It's a 2008, last of the carbureted ones. I bought this bike used. It was my first Triumph, and I've since become quite a fan of the brand. But I've always had an interest in this particular look of motorcycle. I think this style of bike is what a motorcycle should look like, and I've always been attracted to that appearance. As much as I'm an old car person and like fixing things up and have done a couple restorations and so forth, I wasn't sure I wanted to dive into an antique bike. So instead I went this route. Now, I was able to ride an original Meriden model Bonneville, and it's a different beast. First, it's kick-start, has carburetors you have to tickle to get them to work. And a lot of other things. It's much lighter. I think they weigh around 350-ish dry, and it's a different experience. It wasn't what I was expecting, but it wasn't bad. But it also didn't make me want to go out and get one right away either. It's kind of an odd thing. They feel very substantial despite their light weight. That doesn't mean they feel heavy, but they feel substantial, like they're made of good, strong steel, which they are. It does handle very well. The drum brakes were better than I expected, and it was a pleasant and enjoyable experience. I can see why that bike in its day was the quintessential motorcycle, and why they were so successful in this country and sold so many. But by today's standards, it is lacking in a couple of different areas. The gear changes can be cantankerous, and the power delivery is adequate, but it's not outstanding. But it was a nice experience, and I can understand why they were successful and why people would still want them today. I thought maybe that I'd want to get one to add to my collection of stuff, but it's not a bike that spoke to me like some of the others did that I've since ridden. Ridden a lot of different vintage bikes. And I think the Norton Commando is a much better machine. I think it's reflected in its prices on the used market as well. Just a side note too, I rode a BSA Lightning. The BSA is definitely a step below. Not to say that the BSA is a bad motorcycle. It does what it needs to do very well and competently, but that's probably the greatest thing I can say about it is it's competent. It didn't inspire me with a lot of love and affection. But other people have ridden it and thought it was a great machine. So my hierarchy is BSA's at the bottom, Triumph's in the middle, Norton's at the top, and when it comes to vintage bikes. So I bought this as my first Triumph, as I said, and I wanted the look of the classic bike, but I didn't necessarily want the maintenance and potential headaches of it, because I also didn't understand motorcycles when I first got this thing. I wasn't really into them then. I didn't have Whitworth fasteners and all that kind of stuff. So I bought this, and this is a heavy machine compared to the original. This bike weighs, I think, dry around 450 pounds. So it's like 100-ish pounds more than the original Bonneville is. It's got a heavy frame. It's all steel. It's got a heavy, bigger engine. And it does feel heavy, especially when you're moving it around at slow speeds. I can definitely feel the weight there. It doesn't carry it maybe as well as I'd like it to. So it's a little ponderous. The suspension stock on these is pretty bad. The rear shocks in particular are awful. I've changed them on mine. The riding position is pretty much similar to the older ones. If anything, it might be a little bit more cramped, which I find odd to say. But I find it comfortable. I think the stock seat is comfortable. A lot of people don't. I did not put handlebar risers on this one, like I did my Tiger 800, which I subsequently bought also. But I can ride this bike for several hours and not be tired. The gear changes are good. The brakes are pretty good. Not outstanding, but you don't really won't worry about them. And the power delivery is pretty linear and not earth-shattering. It's not to say it's slow. If you're coming off of bikes that are more sport-oriented, this bike is probably not going to excite you. I'm the kind of guy when it comes to motorcycles, I just like to go out and just ride, look at the scenery and maybe 40 to 50 miles an hour. A lot of times on the back roads, I'm just, having a nice time looking around. I'm not really carving the corners with this bike like I do with my Tiger. It instills a little bit more of a hooligan in me. But it's competent in every way. I mean, there's really nothing bad I can say about these Hinckley Bonnevilles, other than the fact that I wish they weighed a little bit less. So the thing that it carries over, though, is it does still have some personality. The original British bikes, of course, had lots of character. And you got vibrations, not all of them unpleasant. Some of the vibrations on the original Bonneville actually were kind of soothing, if I could say that, through the seat. It was almost like it helped you not be fatigued, which is unusual compared to some of the other bikes I've ridden where vibrations are very tiring. This one has some vibration still. You can feel the motor pulsing, but you're not getting beat up through the handlebars or the pegs. So it's much smoother than the original, but it still has that Bonneville British character to it, which none of the Japanese bikes I've ever ridden have had. There is the Kawasaki W650, which was available here for only a couple of years, and they're bringing it back again now. But I've not been able to ride that bike. It is reportedly more British than the Hinckley Bonnevilles are, but they're so rare, and they command such a price on the used market that I couldn't see buying the Japanese copy when I could have more or less the original, even though it's not, but the same brand and so on. So not to say anything bad about the Kawasaki. I haven't ridden it, I don't know. But to me, to spend that kind of money on something that's older and with less power and so on just didn't make sense. So the Kawasaki W650 guys, don't flame me. Then I rode recently the new version of the Hinckley Bonneville, which is the water-cooled one. And this has a much bigger, not much bigger, but has a bigger engine available in the base model. This is an 865. The new Bonneville is like 900 something. And then you can get a 1200 as well. Now, I have a personal phobia, not really a phobia, but a kind of a personal thing against bikes over a liter. I don't see the need for them. I don't need them. I only ride single, I'm not riding two up or anything like that. So I look at these liter and up bikes and I go, why? I have a Tiger 800. That thing has enough power to scare me, so I don't need something bigger than that. So the new 1200s and so forth don't interest me at all. I don't care. The smaller version I did, which was a T100, I believe, that I rode, was improved pretty much in every way over the one I currently have. And I was a little afraid to go and ride it because I thought maybe I'm going to want to trade mine in, which is money I don't want to spend. So I rode this thing on a demo day and took it on a nice ride on some country roads. And what I can say is this about it. The engine is very smooth. The brakes are better. The shifting, probably about the same, maybe a little bit better. The suspension, well, some people still complain about it, is better. I don't think the rear shocks are the terrible things that mine had when it came new. And overall, it's just a vastly improved machine. It's smoother in every sense of the word. There's virtually no vibrations. It's much lighter feeling, even though it does weigh, I think, 10 pounds more than mine. But there's a negative to it. And the negative is this. I don't think the new Bonneville has the character of a British motorcycle. Now, that's a very subjective thing. So if you're coming off a Honda or a Suzuki or something like that, you've been riding Japanese bikes and you want to get one of these vintage looking bikes, but you don't want to put up with the nonsense of an old one. You look at a new Bonneville, you ride that, you're probably going to be very happy because it's a very smooth machine in every sense of the word. But if you're coming from Hinckley, you might not be as thrilled because I wasn't. It was very difficult for me to assess this bike as I was riding it and came back and thought about it on the ride home afterwards. Is this machine better? Well, yes, in every sense of the word, it is better. And everything on paper, it's better. but the sense that you get from riding it, the character, I hate to use that word so much, but the draw of that bike is not as strong to me as my 865. I like the 865. I wish it was some other things. I wish it was lighter. I wish it had better brakes. But I don't dislike it enough to take on the new one and its lack of personality compared to mine. Now, I'm sure there's guys that have Meridens that have ridden a Hinckley like mine and think my bikes have no character because it's much smoother and much better engineered than the originals were. So it's all a matter of perspective. It's all a matter of what you've grown up with, what you've ridden before, and what you're looking for in an experience with a motorcycle. I'm very happy with my Hinckley. I don't think I'm going to change. If something does happen to this bike, I would be hard pressed to decide what I want to get. If I want to get the newer one or this one. I think I would go back and get another one of these, honestly. I don't have the burning desire to buy a Meriden. I would probably buy a Norton Commando. Having experienced that, I think it's a better machine. It's got so much character. It also has a lot of issues that come with that character. So you have to be very careful about what you buy and what you want. But this bike, I think, is probably the best middle of the road for somebody who's looking for the British bike experience without the British bike headaches. These 865s are pretty much bulletproof. There's really no problems that people complain about other than, some of the engineering, like the shocks are terrible, easy enough to change out. The taillights, mine's been changed, as you might see. The taillights were hideous, changed those out. Mine didn't come with a tachometer. I added one of those, aftermarket model, and a couple other things just to make it, a little bit better and a little bit more my own. That's the nice thing about these bikes is you can get anything for them. But that's my assessment on the 3 different Bonneville styles that are available to you, the buyer. If you want to go vintage, you're going to have to deal with kickstart only. You're going to have to deal with some oil leaks, inevitably, and the maintenance that goes with an old machine. The Hinckleys are, the 865s are, in between that, very reliable, not maybe as nimble, not quite as much character as the original, but still retains the Britishness that you may come to expect. The new one's fully modern bike, great if you're coming off something else that's similar. I always say Japanese bikes are probably going to be the most similar bikes to that, and it's going to compare favorably with a Kawasaki Z900 RS, for example. It's a lot of fun. It's a good looking bike. It's well finished. Is it better than some of the competition now that it's just another vintage looking bike and not necessarily a British bike in the classic sense? I don't know. You have to ride the different ones and decide for yourself. So that's basically the differences. Price wise, you're going to spend the same on a Meriden as we are going to spend on an 865 in the used market now. And a fully restored Meriden is going to be as much as a brand new Bonneville from Triumph. So I hope that was of some interest. Hopefully it helps you decide maybe a little bit more what you want to look at. I'm happy with mine. I wish I could go ride it. It is December. So hopefully in a couple of months we'll be out and about again and I'll make some more videos. But until then, thanks for watching. Let me know if you thought this was of any interest.